Hello.
Good morning. Yes.
Morning. Nice to see everyone here. Jesse's already here. Anyways, we had a meeting, Jesse and I had a meeting with the new intern class, or part of the new intern class yesterday.
Yeah, how'd that go?
Pretty well, yeah, pretty well. We had, we went over some of the details of what was going on in the lab. I mean, it's always a challenge to onboard people by throwing a bunch of things at them.
Yeah.
Like all these projects that we're doing and this and that. So one person's interested in virtual reality, but more generally in a lot of the work that we do here. And then the other person is interested in, she's got like a background in biochemistry, but she's also interested in like cognition futures and those sorts of things. So I think there will be a place for people, I mean, I think they probably saw the website and they probably know kind of the general idea of what we have to offer. So hopefully they'll be able to find a place. And yeah.
Nice.
Very good. So Amanda, do you have an update for this week or?
Not really. I've been continuing to sort all my PDFs. But other than that, no update really.
Yeah. Have you come up with any interesting things in the PDF list?
So I'm trying to sort them like with the methodologies project in mind. So I have quite a few that I filed under like first person focused methods. I have a very large, just like EEG folder, a lot of stuff in like dynamical systems theory. I made a cybernetics folder. That's been kind of difficult because I'm doing folders instead of tags, just because that just feels easier to me.
Yeah.
But a lot of these things will go in like, they fall under multiple categories. So my struggle is like creating the hierarchy of folders. So right now I just have like, I don't have a good like nested system. It's kind of just all over the place.
Yeah. Sometimes the nested systems are, I mean, I use something similar a lot of times for different projects, but sometimes nested systems are hard because you have things that fall into multiple categories. So,
right.
But I mean, still, that's good. It sounds good. How many papers do you have to sort?
Oh my God, like 500.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I mean, they're bibliographic programs you can use like Zotero. We've used Zotero in the past, and you can also use something like Mendeley, where you just put the PDF in the program and it pulls out the details and everything.
I have not. I guess I should have assumed that something like that existed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
They're not always perfect, but they're sometimes they'll just import it and it's gibberish, and then you have to like fix it. But
yeah.
In any case, good luck with that. That's
thank you.
I think what I did with that when I was really trying to do that sort of thing, my preferred solution was basically Zotero's. I don't know if it's just for Chrome, but they're like Zotero has like a widget, I guess, or what, I'm not sure what it's called. But it basically you could do the one click and get, if you're on the site, you get all the information from it would pull all of the meta information out. And there are ways to do it with PDFs that you do have, but it's kind of like the easiest for me was just pulling it right from like a website, and then it would be in the system, and you can kind of sort it in the system or tag it within Zotero. We actually, I think this might have been before your time, sort of, Amanda, but we had an actual like group lab folder, or lab Zotero space.
Yeah, I remember that.
But yeah, I'm not. I think I'm kind of. It's a bit of a tangent for where we're at now. So like, I'm not saying you should use that or anything else, but yeah, I think the nice thing about that is that it you would still have the nesting issue, but kind of having tags that go across all of it isn't so bad. And like what's also cool, like you can create these sort of batches or like folders or collections, and then you can just pull like a group citation list for that whole set, which is a nice feature. There was one other thing I wanted to say about that. I forget if you're familiar with like Overleaf or like LaTeX for that, for paper writing stuff, but there's some relation between all of this and getting the BibTeX so that you can cite it in a paper using it in LaTeX. That's like a separate topic for like writing stuff, but yeah. Anyway, good luck with that quest, because
Thank you.
trying to organize papers is.
Yeah, we didn't really stick with the Zotero thing, though. That's the only problem. And you know,
Well,
it's yeah.
And we can, I don't know if we want to go into that, but like I can, it's not on the top of my mind right now, but if we want to further this discussion, I'm sure, you know, we could keep mentioning all that, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of different raises that happen over time, basically. So,
So yeah, thanks Amanda for the update. Jesse, did you have an update?
yes, I do. Okay, I'm trying to put this in the chat. All right, here we go. Here's this week's thing. If anybody wants to.
Okay, the Notion, yes.
Yeah, I am very much looking forward to meeting the new batch. There's a few things. There's one of the students. Someone just recently left Albany and is still very interested and wants to work with us, and we're sorting that out. There are a few folks who have sort of obligations that are preventing them from engaging too much right now. There's the group from last year or like last semester that was like, oh, I wanted to start in spring, that we're kind of waiting to check up on. So it's sort of a little bit of herding cats vibe, but it's there. Outside of that, on a somewhat more personal but related note, I've spent a lot of time organizing sort of web presence, or like public facing things. I've asked Bradley a bunch of questions last night, again about like how should this be worded, or like what do you do this, how to convey this stuff, and it's always interesting, and this can be a whole conversation to get into if we want to go there. I don't really know what you wanted to talk about today yet, Bradley, but like in a professional development, science communicator, or professional researcher sense, like how do you convey some of those things? Like how do you present yourself in a way that's, how are you branding yourself, and what can you say, and how to best do that in a way that's respectful, and kind of like where are you hedging yourself along this line of like, I don't know. I think one end of the spectrum isn't not necessarily technically divided out, but one end of the spectrum is you have your really, you have basically like your GitHub based or like institution based URL that's real simple. Like what I previously been doing was a version of this. Like I did mine via GitHub, and I used the GitHub thing to, kind of say, oh well, I'm active on GitHub and my project's here and stuff like that. And I'm a little bit less interested in doing that now, and just in part because like I realized for public facing websites, the ease of use and efficiency and keeping them updated and accurate is that's the biggest thing for me. And particularly when it comes to adding graphics or slight adjustments, like I realize my priority for those things are ease of functionality, and the less time I spend in those environments, the better, because I could outsource it totally, which I've considered doing, which that's also like you pay somebody to do that, or like, but because so much of what I need to do is super specific, it's just going to be like the ease of it. But you kind of have this one end of the spectrum is this sort of minimalist academic, no graphics, like text writing, which are often accompanied by very outdated 20-year-old photos from like tenured professors or PI people, or the newer folks who are kind of almost trying to emulate that with a cooler version. And then the other side of that, you have like heavy design, pictures, and like really intricate website things. And I feel like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to spend a lot of time designing my website. And also, I'm not in a field where that's super important. I feel like what I've ended up with doing with the Jopro website has been really good, of just like, here's a summary with some projects and like just enough information to be sort of relevant, or the abstract, or like those things, that's fine, because it's basically a portfolio, and it's not too much details. I think that's been a big quest for me, is like, how much detail about what things do you want to convey? And sort of the determinant of that is your audience and what part of the process someone's coming into that. And I realized, like, especially for the lab and for what I've been doing with Jopro and for myself, it's like so much of this stuff at this level is like is public facing to the people who don't have like almost any context, basically.
Yeah.
And because I predominantly talk to the people who have medium to ultimate capacity for context, like the people in this lab, there's nobody in the world who understands cognitive futures better than people in this lab.
Right.
And that's sort of it's kind of funny to say it that way, but it's entirely true. Like you too have a fidelity to my understanding and intentions, and maybe a couple other people in the lab, like you two, or have, compared to the entire planet, like the comparison is huge. The difference is so dramatic. And you have maybe people in the field or people, whatever, that there's different gradients in that sense. But it's just like thinking about that when you're communicating or writing or designing stuff is important, because it's so easy to, I don't know, not comprehend all that. So suffice to say, I spent some time there this week. I'm doing some deadlines and applications and other things, and I'll mention briefly here, like even plot twisters has started to take more shape of itself in terms of its organizational structure. We're doing some. It's. I think Jenny, the sort of founder, is seriously moving towards a more, I don't want to say incorporation, like the structure of plot twists is becoming more serious and more explicit and taking shape, and that's yeah, I've kind of been down this road a few times with different groups, and I've seen some of the startups that I've been with before and how they've done that and what was good or bad. So I'm really excited about what plot twist is doing because I think they're addressing. Um, I just had a thought now. I don't think it would really be tremendously helpful because it's a different thing than what we're doing here. But I may mention to Jenny, um, it may be used. I'll float it by her, and obviously it's kind of dependent on Bradley too. But it may be nice to have like a small, off the record private meeting about like organizational structure.
Yeah.
Because what the lab does is very, very different. And I think Jenny was kind of surprised when she came here and started understanding more about academic stuff. Like, oh, like you guys do it this way, that's super different than everything else. I was like, yes, we do. And there's very, 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 very specific reasons why that's the case, and what, plot twist is significantly more product focused than the lab is, in the sense of there's a specific, not necessarily money hungry in the way that it might sound, but like there's a specific output that is going to be based on having users, and then that interaction between all of that stuff towards the aims of plot twist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it might be. I'll mention that just because there's a lot of like discussion happening now, and you seemed open to having that discussion, Bradley. So
Yeah.
To be determined. I kind of feel like that's maybe not. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen, especially right now because there's just a lot going on. But plot twist has been very exciting, and it's going through that process with them, and then what I mentioned previously or moments ago myself, and even like the website stuff, like putting how do I write this on my CV, how do I write this on my website again, and beyond just like the Jopro portfolio, but like how do I associate myself with this, and how do I, not necessarily the elevator pitch, but like when I'm talking to someone with no context, what am I saying to them to frame their whole perception of it? Like that's a lot of work. Like it's so much work, and it's like what's the explore exploit benefit of all this stuff? Like I feel like the best sustainable practice for me for this is like semi-annually or quarterly check-ins about that, because it changes so much and your view changes so much, especially where I am in a lot of the projects, and because I'm doing different things, there's sort of this, you can't update it too much, and I feel like that's partly why, even to an extent it applies to the Zotero stuff, I suppose, but partly why I'm not using the GitHub stuff anymore, and I move towards much simpler practices that I feel like I have a sense of I want to spend this much time on this. I want it to be so up to date or so relevant, and I want it's like how do you put energy, like just the right amount of energy to that stuff, and then put more to like the writing and the reading and the work, and then how, like, what's the pipeline? I think that's the big question for researchers and early like science communicators and people who are doing the public facing stuff, because like, if you're going down the road of I'm a professional academic or a researcher that's doing, if all you're doing is working in industry and working on specific technical projects, maybe it's just how do you put your findings into a paper or a patent or whatever. But when you're doing other kinds of stuff, or you're trying for certain things, or you're doing like, I'm inherently related to like there's speaking, there's like quote unquote consulting, there's writing, there's like the mentoring in public. Like I have to have a public face for what I'm doing because what I'm doing is involved in that, kind of whether I like it or not. So just like, what do I do with that? And all of that has been a factor in everything I'm saying. So that's definitely been an update. And if people want to talk about any of that or there's pieces people want to expand upon, let me know. I said a lot there, but there's a lot of specific points that I don't know. I feel like it's sort of the craft that we talk about, and we kind of have these periodic professional development sessions in the lab, and this is sort of a primer to a bigger discussion that can be had in that sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so I had a couple comments. So first of all, yeah, I think that would be great to have a meeting with Jenny about organizational things, and I don't know what kind of challenges she's facing putting together this group of people, but this is definitely something I've been thinking a lot about recently in light of the course that I'm teaching on project management. So coming up with these sort of organizational, how are certain organizations unique versus other organizations? If you're doing things that are explicitly sort of academic or explicitly towards building a product, there are going to be different processes there. But when you're working in these distributed groups, you still have the challenge of bringing together people from different places, different time period. They're working at different times a day, or whatever. So it's a way to get things synthesized and a way to move them forward. So yeah, I'd love to talk about that.
okay, and even mentioning, I think what I'll do is I'll mention the project, the course, which I haven't seen anything from this week about it. I know that was sort of that started this week, and
Yeah, I'll talk about
maybe
that.
mention a little bit of that later. But yeah, I'll mention the course and then kind of this discussion. And I kind of see it right now as, because we're doing some things currently that are eating up time. I feel like this will be something that I mention and something that we will be a useful resource to have when we're ready to do it. So it may not be an immediate thing, but I think the discussion, particularly the project management and breaking down, because there's a plot twisters, a wing, or I don't know, a section of plot twisters that will be a little bit more like research academic-y focused and like producing maybe not papers, but something close to that, documenting the output, like kind of like white papers or just like what they're doing. And then there's like heavy there's a lot of stuff on user design. There's a lot of stuff on like we're going to be looking at Python for, I don't know if it was sentiment analysis, but just Python for some of the sorting out some of the interactions between the user and otherwise. And there's a lot of, someone's very familiar with that in plot twisters, and they're going to kind of give us a tutorial about it, and little different things like that. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm happy to talk more about people. If people are interested in plot twisters stuff, just reach out to me or reach out to Jenny and that group. But yeah, cool stuff's happening there. Anything else you wanted to say about all that stuff I mentioned, Bradley, or move on to next?
Well, I think it'd be interesting to have like a presentation on the current state of plot twisters too. If you would be open to that, or Jenny would be open to that. I mean, you don't have to give away trade secrets or anything, but you just to kind of go over, especially for the interns, so that they have like a place to see what that is. I think that would be good.
It's interesting because it's starting to transition to away from, it's kind of been born, I think it's publicly been born now with the IDEO grant that I got. And there's sort of, we're dealing with the process of like, now there's external expectations or timelines, and it's not just sort of very passionate small people who like intellectually and emotionally are in the process of like begetting or like conceiving and manifesting this concept. So, and it's very, very high level project group management stuff, which I always seem to be drawn to, so that's sort of my thing to be a nerd about. But in a more functional sense, yeah, like what's actually going on, like where can things go, and are you looking for like interns or support or volunteers or help? Yes, and that I will mention that also to kind of see where it is, or maybe if Jenny wants to present it herself, we'll see. So yeah, that'll be forthcoming. Yeah, I'm good. So there's all, that's kind of that chunk. There are a few other updates that I guess I'll just go into.
Okay.
Oops. Let me pull this up here. I'm just gonna reference Slack right now.
All right.
Oops. Oh. So the Cognition Futures Writing Group met once again. We're plowing through chapter 6. And I just pressed the wrong button. Yeah, that was good. I actually, oh yeah, I had a lot on my mind after the last meeting. I'm actually gonna go look at Slack and see what I said there, because I had this big long reply.
Yeah, I saw that. I think it's in there.
Can you still see this? Or is
Yeah,
this not?
yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Slack. There it is.
I had a really big long reply after it, and I'm not going to get into what all this means right now. But it's been interesting to think a lot about what I would like teleological determinism, which isn't Fuchs' term was what did he say?
Emergence.
Teleological emergence. And talking about different types of emergence and like weak and strong emergence. There's a lot of things there. But this isn't, I'm not trying to say this is what we talked about. I'll defer more to actual notion of this is where we were actually talking about things. But let's see, we kind of continued here. Aspectivity, emergence. We had an interesting conversation about bird flocks and synergies. And it's a lot's going on there. It's good. And we talked a little bit more about moving the project forward more. We're still like on the to-do list is updating the mission statement, refining the questions, and making the questions a bit more project or like oriented, and being able to track according to those questions on the project. So there's a lot of like admin work to do there, and I'm looking forward to doing that. Go back to Slack here too. So that's kind of a very brief look into like very theoretical fun stuff that's going on there. Let's see. Here's some intern updates. But also the big news of this week is we did get accepted at New York Celebration of Learning Computing. When our talks focused on basically like key hot topics that are affecting and technical careers. It was about all this here. You can kind of read it, but we were accepted for that. And then we just saw Brian kind of wants to go in person. Ankit just asked about sending it in the mail, but I'm not sure what that means necessarily. Like I can forward you the email, but there's nothing particular about it. But yeah, that's great news, and we can kind of center that a bit more. Every February 1st, there's so much due. February 1st, and I'm kind of like, there's so much to sort out. I have like grad school deadlines. I have project and submission deadlines. Also stuff. Oh, also I wanted to say, speaking of deadlines, this deadline got accepted. So I'm going to submit something to this. But this got pushed back basically to February 1st as well.
Okay.
So January 31st. I'm gonna put 1 or 2 submissions into that, kind of based off of. I think I'm gonna actually incorporate plot twisters into this here, and then also kind of blend the New York celebration when computing into this too. So that's still on the docket. I think it's my broad range of updates. That was sort of cognition future, society, tech, ethics and tech, and some professional development, educational stuff, plot twisters. What am I missing? Internships and there's a little bit more in terms of some of the hardware VR stuff, but I'll get into that some other time. But I think that that's I will pass the mic and be done with my lab manager, project manager, intern manager updates.
Okay. Well, yeah, and then are you still submitting the CogSci conference too? That's February 1st.
Yes.
Okay.
That's also on the docket. So I don't have as much to say about that right now, but that's obviously
Jesse, can you like update me or like update in the doc as to like what are the areas that each of us are going to like prepare for the talk?
Yeah, it's going to be, it's basically everything that I said in the in Slack in terms of we're gonna have three or four. I see 3 or 4. We have basically 20 minutes. I would say 20 to like, I don't know, 23 minutes or something like that. And it's going to be 3 to 4 flash talks. And I feel like we don't know exactly. We'll decide. We'll have to demarcate who wants to cover what. I feel like, I know you were really interested in like basically what you wrote. I think what you wrote out in the Notion space, Ankit, is basically like an abstract for your flash talk, or can be. So whatever space you want to cover in that is fine. I know Brian will have his own tool, sustainability auditing tool, and perhaps ethical regulators to do. So that's kind of 2 right there, or maybe 3. I don't know if Bradley wants to put anything in terms of. I don't know if Bradley would want to like latch on to the ethical regulator or do something totally separate from Brian's stuff, or like blend into Brian's talks. Brian's not here, so I can't answer that entirely. But I feel like that's already 2 to 3, and then so it depends who else wants to participate. There's kind of an open space for either kind of joining Ankit's zest, if that's still what you want to do, or other things. We kind of have that, the abstract is sort of a big, broad canvas that we have, and then it's like, all right, what are the details we want to talk about? So that's,
Exactly. So I was kind of thinking about like let's say if we know each of us like knows which topic we want to do, then maybe we can just write it down so that there is no too much overlap between all of our talks. So like we have commonalities, but we
well,
can
yeah.
smoothly like transition from one to the other.
To that end, I would say, well, I guess what I'll say too is the thing about this in terms of the email is that the next like functional goal, also by February 1st, is really paring down the abstract, because they want basically abstract to be in the format of the program at this point. So 50 words is not much. That will be a little bit dependent on that'll be a deliverable basically from what we're doing. But what I would say is like going back to Notion, I think it's here. Yeah. I think this is what Ankit started writing here. I would basically just say turn this into a specific, I don't know, it kind of already is an abstract, but you don't have to write an abstract, but I would say maybe for you, like put your let's see, maybe I'll make a separate section for this. So basically put an outline of what you want to talk about, like outline for your talk. Because as far as I'm concerned, you can be, you're the lead on this flash talk basically. And what do you want to put in it? Because right now there's no Brian's stuff directly isn't going to overlap with, Brian's not going to be talking about GTV3. He might want to join this, but he has his own stuff. And Bradley, might want to join this, but why don't you sort of take leadership of everything that you wrote here, like this. Make this your own flash talk and title, and talk about what it's going to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're basically saying that my portion would kind of be like the main thing of the small flash talks, right?
I mean, I don't really know if it's going to be main, but there's it will be one of them, in the sense of this is each of the flash.
Okay. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically you're saying that we'll have multiple different topics, but the theme will probably remain the same.
Well, yeah, the theme is the abstract. We have, just to be clear, we have 20 minutes for all of us. We all have a collective chunk of time. So what we've done in the past is we'll just break that time down into different presentations that are sort of discrete. So when I say
it's 20 minutes for each of us.
No.
All of us. So it's 4 or 5 minutes per person.
Okay,
right.
So approximately 4 or 5, yeah, okay.
Right, so it's flash talk time length. So I'll move this into, I'm just gonna make this here.
So right now for February 1st, it's the abstract submission, am I right?
No. Let's start over. I've submitted the abstract. We are accepting.
Okay.
We have 20 minutes. We have basically 30 minutes total, and they're going to reserve about 10 for question and answer, or whatever. This is for all of us, the whole lab that's been submitted. Moving now, we're accepted. We're breaking down our about 20 minutes of time into different segments of time. Each of those, outside of like an introduction and a conclusion part, which will be very short, we'll have these sort of 3 or 4, 5 to 7 minutes, 4 to 7 minute, whatever, flash talk segments. And I'm saying, your flash talk within the context of this broader thing can be, you're the leader of this, you're the leader of this programmatically generated.
So basically, so I understood. It's like segments. Each of us will have like our own segments, right?
Right, and maybe someone will want to join you on that, but right now, no one's. There is actually someone who was one of the interns. I think Aiden was actually really interested in this, specifically about GTP3s. They may want to like join on you, but like you would be the more senior person here anyway. So like I'm gonna feel like you're the leader of this talk.
So by February 1st, what are the things that we like need to like be prepared with?
Nothing, like basically nothing. The only thing due February 1st is we have to review the feedback, which I will send out. And then just submit a final version of the abstract. So that's not, as far as the flash talk goes, you don't have to do anything, like nothing is due for you from that. It's just we have to just boil down the abstract. That's all.
Okay, so basically we have to review, see what the reviewer says, and we have to make sure the abstract is as per what he says as of now.
Yeah, the only thing that's due the first is abstract tweaking, and no content, no like whatever. We will have some other like, I do want to make some deadlines for people to like let's make progress on the flash talks, but that's going to be not February 1st. Like I'm not going to be particularly like, I want to keep momentum going, but like I have a bunch of other stuff that needs to happen at that time. So I'll be talking a little bit more about the actual flash talks and their content into February.
Sure. So basically right now we don't really have to worry about like the main content. Right now it's just about making sure the abstract is according to the format, etc.
The schedule will be February and March will be all about refining the content on the flash talk. So we have 2 months starting February if we want.
So from what I can understand, we still have a little bit time. But what I'm thinking is that since you have already like told me that we have 4 to 5 minutes, I will kind of start gathering all my content, making like an outline, and so that I'm a little bit ahead of schedule.
Yeah, and what we've done in the past is flash talks, are inherently insufficient. Like they're not going to be covering everything we want to do. So what I would kind of suggest for you to do, you don't have to, but since you seem pretty involved and invested in this, I would suggest, you don't have to make a full paper necessarily, but maybe a blog post, like a Medium blog post that's a lot more in depth than the flash talk can be. And you can say, we've kind of done here's my flash talk where I'm going to introduce some big concepts. For more, please see my blog post or other work that you've done talking about that topic, because I know you've
okay, so that's pretty interesting. So what I could do is first write a Medium post, and then I could then remove the extra information and put that in the slide. Everything.
Yeah, that's definitely.
That sounds very interesting. Also.
An option. Here we go. Sorry.
Yeah. I think I'll probably go with that route. First, I'll start writing it down on Medium, and then based on that information, I'll cut it down to like 5 minutes.
Yeah. I don't know, was my screen not sharing for any of that? It doesn't really matter. I was just sharing like the Notion page and just the email. I don't know. Was my screen sharing at all for that, or does it matter?
From my side, I can't see.
Okay. Well, I was just to show you what I was showing. I would just here in Slack is sort of this, and then the Notion space. I was basically going. I was making this new section so we can break down what our flash talks will be, because we'll have like an intro, and the order may change, but for now, intro, Ankit's, however you want to title that or word that, Brian, the SAT tool. I don't know, what were you, do you have anything that you were thinking of talking about specifically, Bradley, or do you want to just piggyback off of the other ones, or?
I'm not sure yet. We'll see what everyone puts in there, and I have a couple ideas, but I'm not gonna commit to anything right now. Yeah.
These are just really simple notes, but like,
Right.
I'll make sure to like link the medium that I'm working on and the slides as well somewhere over here.
Yeah, and you don't have to do that. If you just want to do a flash talk, you can. But I feel like you have a lot to say, and you're good at writing. You like to write, so if you want to do that, I think that's what we've kind of done in the past with a lot of our stuff. Because the flash talks are, flash talks are tough, but I think the form, like the way it's worked with New York Celebration of Women in Computing, and what's cool is that like you kind of maybe see here. Am I still sharing my screen?
Yes.
Or no?
Yes, it is.
So weird.
Yeah.
It goes away. Anyway, Brian asked to go in person, so that's cool. I will probably try to go in person, but I still think what we're going to do, I guess I should say this, I didn't say this yet. I would like to basically pre-record all the flash talks, and then just show up and put everybody's sort of nice, trimmed talk and have it down, have the timing down. And then what we'll try to do is, and what we did last time pretty successfully, is basically have just the open so people can join in for question and answer session at the end, or live chat, or say, and like, because Ankit's in a different time zone, I'll say, you can come to like our Slack or Discord or someplace and you can talk to Ankit if you have more questions, sort of thing. So we'll kind of have this openness of, we're gonna have a live session at this event, but it's going to be it'll be hybrid in nature. We'll have like pre-recorded flash talks, or the like in-person introduction. We'll get the timing down for that and the order, and then
Okay, so I just had an idea related to that, and as far as I know, I think you and probably Brian are going to be present, right? So
Right.
This it's a small thing, but I think it would be great if like someone is going there and presenting, so it would be good for an audience. So the idea that I had is that like we could take all our flash talks and then like pass it to GPT-3, ask it to like generate what are the possible set of questions, and then we can like probably again generate the answers from that, and then like you can say to the audience like, oh yeah, GPT-3 already anticipated this question, so here's the answer, like that. So you could probably have some sort of impact.
I think that would be a fun thing to incorporate. I'll let you, if you want to, I will let you like orchestrate or play around with that. If you want to do that, I'm sure we can incorporate GTP3 into it in a more like functional way, like directly somehow. It seems fun.
Yeah, that'd be great. Be wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I take it that this is largely for like looking at practice and education as much as the technology. So that's something I want to maybe focus on. So yeah, I think that'll be
Yeah,
great.
that might be a thing because I think Ankit's gonna focus. Well, I think it may be nice to have some of your commentary, Bradley, like in educational sense. It's a big thing, obviously. Ooh, high school English doesn't matter anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, more along the lines of like computer science education or like
Yeah,
facilitating like how would you get into this area. I mean, that's one thing I noticed last time, or at least that I was thinking last time with the talk that I gave was, how do you get people involved in these niche areas? A lot of maybe people haven't been exposed to them, or they've heard about the hype and they don't have like a lot of information about like how do you, because you have these new things that come along and they don't get incorporated into the curriculum until several years after the fact, just the nature of course design. And then by then it's, there's been a lot of hype, there's been a lot of activity, and people don't necessarily get a good handle on what these things are and what their potential is. So, I mean, this is an opportunity, I think, to like maybe put some of this into context and, something they're not going to get in their classroom necessarily, but something that's also not like unbridled hype or misinformation or whatever. It's yeah. I
yeah,
mean, it's so. I mean, that's well. We'll talk about that more later. I think this is great though. This is coming along. Uh, yeah, Ankit, I look forward to that. That would be great to have like a GPT-3 question and answer session. Like set it up so that okay, here's how the question answering works, and
yeah. That could go in like the Medium post a little bit, perhaps also, but also like there may be a way to I don't know, like I don't know if you. I'll leave it to you. Like I don't know if you want to incorporate that into your Flash talk directly or like in as kind of like just a primer to the question and answer session at the end. So that's all fun stuff to think about.
Mm,
And I'll follow
yeah,
up with, I don't know if
bro.
try to mention Aiden. I know Aiden was really interested in GTP3 stuff, but they're not that experienced with it, so they're just sort of interested in hearing that.
Yeah. What I was probably thinking was that this is better reserved towards like the end when like people have any questions, and then like when you answer the question, like you could pretend as if it was like me live, and then you could then just say, oh, it was not actually the person, it was GPT-3. So that's something that I was thinking of.
Yeah, I'm open to that. If you can think how you'd want to do that.
you could have a little
In
avatar.
the in the meantime, I was thinking, yeah, I'll talk with Aiden also because it would be good to collaborate with him
We'll do
if he's interested in the topic.
we'll do a live demonstration of like the Chinese room / Turing test of like, hey, let's answer this question and see what comes out. Oh, that's really informative, Ankit. And then it's like, oh, it's not Ankit.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, but
We'll see. Yeah.
that's fun. Yeah, and I'll mention actually going to mention Ankit or Aiden in the I'll mention him in the Slack and yeah. Okay, sounds good. I think that's all I have to say about that stuff right now. But I'm glad we had that discussion, and I know Brian's. I think he'll just be getting from Brian what he wants to draw upon. I think that'll kind of be the next determinant of things, and I'm going to try to. I might try to. Something about the open data, like I'm gonna have one piece. It may be like I don't know if it'll be a flash talk, but like I'm gonna spend a couple minutes on the data thing because I feel like that's something that needs to be emphasized and that I haven't really seen very emphasized as much. I kind of mentioned to Bradley. I'm not sharing my screen again. I mentioned to Bradley a meeting or two ago, but in the data sense, it's like I think we're basically. I don't know if we want to do our own blog post about it or something, but there's kind of this growing push for the legitimacy of open source, open data, open science. Like the NIH is here. I came up at NeurIPS, Neuroscience 21. Even the APA, American Psychological Association, they're making your work open source or open data was part of their like acceptance criteria. Something they're looking at in accepting even just like posters at that event. So it's just like this push that's really happening in this direction. I think I'm gonna, even if it's just 2 or 3 or 4, like I don't know, a paragraph or 2 of talking, I'm gonna do that for sure. So I don't know if it's gonna be a whole flash talk, but there will be a
it could be a flash talk of its own if you could like talk about like uh, machine learning reproducibility. Like you just talked about like the criteria for like open sourcing your work. So this could be like a slight extension to it. So we could add to that if you're talking about that.
Yeah, definitely. There will be, yeah, yes. Okay. I think that's kind of where we're at with this one. I'm glad you came on to get able to discuss that, Ankit. I think I'm ready to turn it back to Bradley.
Okay. Well, yeah, that looks great. I'm glad that we're moving that along. And it sounds like we have 20 minutes, but we have a lot more ideas that are going to be in that 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I don't want to.
I feel pretty good about sort of like, I kind of see like the way we do it, because flash talks, and for those of us who've been in a lab and done them at like Neuromatch or other things, we kind of know the routine now of like flash talks are actually really challenging because you have such precious attention and time and ability to go deep. And so you have to be only so deep and say so much, and then it's basically like being like a billboard. Like you're driving by it for like a few seconds, and then you have this other link to something. Please check out our work in blog post, this paper, this preprint, this website. Like that's what it's about. So it definitely is an art form, but I think that will be. I really like these setups, especially this event, because this event is so much for the like early career folks, people who are trying to get context for this career, and we have these things that are like really relevant. We have like all of the Google Summer of Code work that actually kind of ironically, like Bradley and Brian, particularly Bradley last year, talked about the prior to the Google Summer of Code and all the open source sustainability, and now like a year, that'll be a fun thing to say. Like a year later, look what's happened. We developed this over the course of this summer. We've had these Google Summer of Code. Part of them spun off into a course at UAlbany, and now have a tool, and that's one branch of things. And then the GTP tree stuff is like a major topic. And open data stuff is a major topic, and like these are all really important things for early career people to know, and also grad students, people are fighting for funding. Like this is all very, very relevant to that. So I mean, I feel I'm happy about it already, and I think it's only going to be even more cool the more we flesh it out. So
Yeah.
The end.
Great. Yeah. Ankit. So I know that Ankit and I have been working on this paper that he presented at a conference, and then he got the proofs, and so everything's going all right with that. Are you still there, Ankit?
Oh, you're asking. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's something I want to talk about.
Okay.
So what happened was that one of the references, the links, that was in Spanish, I think.
Okay.
Sorry, it was in Portuguese.
Oh,
So
okay.
what happened was that I misunderstood who the main author was,
Oh,
and I
okay.
wrote the wrong author name.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
But the link I think is correct.
Okay.
Why? Because it links an article, and the article links a book. But
Right.
the situation is that I should have cited the book probably, but I
Oh,
probably kind of cited like the article. But
yeah.
now the main issue is like it's okay, like it's still citing the source, the book somehow. But the main issue that I noticed was the book which contains the actual link that does not work.
Hmm.
So I think as of now, let's just leave it like that. If someone messages us, then we can probably point them to the correct resource.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how citations work. Sometimes if they're like in journals, they're pretty stable. But like a lot of times we'll cite things on the web and those URLs change. That's why it's important to do things like put things in a repository that has a DOI attached to it. Because the idea behind a DOI is that you have a stable place a stable citation place. So your DOI is like this DOI, and it has like some numbers after it and some letters, and that address is also a URL. So it's it points right to that thing, and it's always maintained. And then that's why people will take things like their GitHub repository and they'll put it up on some third-party repository, and then they'll assign that can assign DOIs, and then they'll assign the DOI to it. So that's just a point of just thinking about how to cite things and how to make permanent citations for your work. But also, yeah, you do run into that problem where people will put a book online and then it's in a place where it's no longer active after say 5 years. And so that's always I've had that problem a number of times, but it's just something you have to work around. Ideally, papers wouldn't be like static. We'd have like things you could update. Like we'll publish things in PDF form, and sometimes those things become out of date, and that's just the way it is, I guess. But you know, we're working on alternatives to that. So, anyways, yeah, that looks good, Ankit. I look forward to seeing the final version of the publication. I don't know if they're gonna have it in a volume or anything like that.
Yeah, sure. I remember. I think either it was Daniela or Angela who had probably like told me about like that the DO. I think that you're talking
Oh,
about.
right,
Like,
yeah,
so I had made sure to like get a DOI for our repository,
right.
the code that we have using Zenodo.
Zenodo, yes.
Yes, that was very helpful, and I'll update you like when we received like the final manuscript.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely good stuff. So I'm gonna start to present on some things now. Let's see. Oh, it wants me to share everything here. Okay. All right. So we've had a lot of things in the news in the lab. We've had interns coming in, and I wanted to do an overview of what we have here in terms of assets. So we have a main website, orthogonalresearchweebly.com, and this is sort of a root directory for what we're doing in the lab. So we have a lab introduction, which is actually hosted on our GitHub. This goes through some of the things. This is sort of out of sync with the current date. It's like maybe midway through 2022. but that's just kind of an overview of some of the things we've done. We have people collaboration. So in our meeting yesterday, I mentioned that we have a couple of headings here. The way I've kind of put together the different things that we have. And we have a lot of distributed projects, so we have different websites for different things. In the meetings, you'll see, for example, you'll see references to Cognition Futures. You'll see references to the Society Ethics and Tech, and they're all different websites. And that's sort of the idea, because we have people running projects, in different areas, and we don't want to, we could standardize them, but we also want to keep them under control of the people running the project, because that's easier to update them. And so, I don't want to make this like a corporate top-down thing, but so we have these different areas, and we have websites that will tell you kind of the details of those projects. So in an area called Simulating Biology, we have two sort of projects or areas. We have DevoWorm, which is the developmental biology aspect, or computational developmental biology of simulating biology. And then we have the OpenWorm Foundation, which actually backs DevoWorm in a lot of ways, and has other resources for building digital models of the model organism C. elegans. So if you're interested in this area, these are our two areas of reference. DevoWorm actually goes a bit beyond C. elegans to other model organisms, but we can talk about that. There's a whole different world. We have a meeting for DevoWorm, and this is something we can talk about. We also have an area of neuro AI, and that's again a category that we've cast for some of this work. And in that area, and this isn't really what this is just a box, so not all of it is in this area, but it just kind of gives you an idea of where we're coming at it from. We have this representational brains and phenotypes, which is a group of all of our work on sort of agent-based models with respect to a lot of the AI work that we're interested in, or artificial life work that we're interested in, falls under this category. So, for example, the stuff we've done with Bradenburg vehicles, or the stuff that we've done with other types of computational agents, is in there. Then we have Cognition Futures, which is, of course, what Jesse talked about earlier. This is a lot of things to do with cognitive science and thinking about the future of cognitive science, and a lot of these other topics, the philosophy of mind and things like that. It's interesting that both of these involve a fair amount of philosophy. And again, this is the way we're approaching this neuro AI topical area. So it's a bit different than how some other people present this topic, but that's our sort of niche. And then we have, of course, open source and open science. So we have some more practical things like the open source community auditing tool. This is something that's sort of built out of our practice of this. So it's not the same thing as something like Cognition Futures. It's more like something that was generated as an artifact. So, we have this sort of thing. We have Open Science and Data, which is a collection of, it's not really a project, it's just some outlook. It's a general outlook on these things in practice. And then BroadGen Brain, which is actually, this is one of our many open source tools, but I might update this later to reflect some of the other things that we have. So, but this is our area. We've generated a lot of open source and open data and open science related artifacts. So that's what this represents. Then we have an area of informatics, which is where we have a couple of different subtopics here. We have this reconstructing cybernetics. So we do have this project where we're interested in talking about cybernetics, maybe the ideas behind cybernetics, the history, the philosophy of it, how to apply it to different systems. So it's a very general thing. We approach it from the cybernetics standpoint and not necessarily like applying different methods. So like instead of like control theory, we're kind of interested in cybernetics or maybe like the philosophical aspects of cybernetics with respect to some analysis. So, we might even move in the direction of kind of coming up with our own analyses or types of analysis based on cybernetics. So, we've talked a lot about feedback. We talk a lot about structures, feedback structures, regulatory structures. Those actually all fall into this category. Then we have AI ethics in society, which is a heading where we talk about AI, but from the standpoint of ethical issues, general social implications and impact. And then also, some of the things like we've talked about with GPT-3. There's a lot of hype around these technologies and how do we sort of distill the technology through the hype, or, how do we allow people to understand that better? Or maybe even, with the auditing tool, for example, how do we get people to work more sustainably for open source? So these are all sort of in this area. It's sort of an anecdote to the tools that we have in the open science, open source area. So we have these tools, and then we reflect upon the tools here. And then we have this data reuse initiative, which isn't very active, but it's something that we've developed, with respect to open data. And so it's another project that some of these projects are more active than others. Some of them are sort of in a period of sort of stasis. You could say they're in a cocoon, and they're just waiting for people to be activated to work on them. So we have a structure in the lab where we have people come in and they're interested in something, and then they'll work on that project, and then they may go away, and they've made their imprint on that project, and then depending on who's interested in what, we can drive projects forward. Sometimes it takes a while to come back to those projects. Sometimes we can keep them going continually. We have a number of other resources here. We are heavily involved in Google Summer of Code. We have internships available through this organization, Jopro, which is Jesse's organization. It's a mentoring organization. This is the place to go for that. We're involved in NeuroMatch Academy. And then we have our Slack teams. We mostly operate at an orthogonal lab, but we also, if you're interested in DevoWorm, you go to the OpenWorm Slack, and there's a lot of activity there. And then these topical Discord servers, which are related to some of these other topics. So principles of bits to matter to mind is a lot of the VR stuff, a lot of the neurotech stuff. Computational critical periods are talking about critical periods in development and computational aspects of that. And then the big unfinished ideas Discord is for education. We have a number of educational channels in there for classes and other things. And in fact, this project management course that I'm teaching this semester will be have a component in this Discord. So you'll notice this animation. It kind of goes through some of the projects and some of the papers that we've done in the group. So this is society, ethics, and tech. This is some things with contextual geometric structures, which is a project from a while back. We haven't worked on it in a while. There is this other project called Phasic, which has sort of the intersection of this neuro AI and virtual reality and augmented cognition and things like that. So these projects intersect in different ways. This framework is just for some of the sort of the umbrella projects or themes, and then we have these other things that emerge from that kind of form at the intersection. So that's how we're organized. I just wanted to go over that just to give people an idea of where the interns mainly coming into the lab, an idea where we are with that.
Yeah, we'll have to get a timestamp to this and put it in the intern channel just so they can get a little more context.
Oh yeah,
I think always sort of the hard thing is it's like you're thrust in the middle of a like Grand Central Station. There's all these trains coming and going. You don't really know which is where, but they're moving, and that's like how do you explain and give them some context? So
yeah, the lab timetable, I guess.
yeah,
All right, so that's that. Then, if you're interested in this, this is the Principles of Bits to Matter to Mind Discord. There are a lot of interesting things in here, like different channels that have different readings. I really wanted to break this out because we were doing this in the Slack, and Slack has become very hard to archive. And so this gives us some room to develop some of these ideas further. So if you're interested, join up. We have different channels, one on human augmentation, one on neurobotics. I posted some things on this. This stuff on, this is about a person, he's a Spanish researcher from the middle of the last century who put some implants in a bull, and he was able to switch on and off the bull's aggression circuit or aggression behaviors. And there is a new paper on the bioarchive, a relatively new paper, where they bring that back and they talk about some of the aspects of social aggression that can be disrupted in different ways. So, there are a lot of tie-ins to like old science and new science, and those are very interesting. We'll put in, different things like that just to get people thinking about some of these topics. And then there are things on virtual reality applications. I know Aiden mentioned that he was interested in virtual reality. So we have a lot of different, like, features where they have artifacts. In virtual reality, artifacts are very important. So there we have that as well. So that's something to follow up on for people who are interested in that area. Now, this project management course, here's the Discord. We've had some activity. I have people joining in from the physical class I'm teaching. There are people who in the lab who want to participate in this. And this is just a course that goes over project management in a very deep way. It goes over project management from a open perspective. So, but something they call working open, or these ideas of open source software being applied to managing different projects, broader than just software, but using those same principles. So this is project management from the perspective of these distributed collaborative groups that are all over the world that have open features like open documents, version control, things like that. So there are a whole bunch of like features to these kind of projects. And I'm trying this week. We have some slides from this week, so it's the first two lectures, and these first two lectures really kind of ground people in this worldview. So if I go to actually it's not quite where I want to be yet. So we go to the first lecture. It's just basically from an open perspective. There's a syllabus which is in the Discord, and then this curriculum is good for a number of different types of people. Talking about the history of open source and open access, and open access has a history that goes back almost 100 years. There are a number of landmarks. We can define open source in different ways. There's a licensing regime. There's like a version control regime. There is it has to be technology neutral, which means that people should be able to access it in different platforms. And versioning, of course, again, the free distribution and remixing, which is actually where you use Creative Commons or some type of license like that, but it enables a lot of these distribution channels and remixing with a clear understanding of how that should proceed. So if I want to, if there's something I put out in the world that is free to share no matter what, that's fine. But if there's something I explicitly don't want people to make a profit off of, I can select a license that makes that explicit. And so then going through some of the some of the things about open source software and the difference between that and a proprietary platform, which is a very fundamental shift in mindset. And giving examples of how these projects evolve. So you have these projects that have different forks, and so these forks actually can be generated from a main project. So I can fork a project and modify it and make my own project. And then there are these genealogies where things get forked and things get forked from those forks, and you end up with these product genealogies or these project genealogies. So you have like a source project, and it becomes there's a project that gets forked from that, and it maybe have different features and maybe specialized, but they're all sort of this has happened in a lot of different types of software. But you could imagine that these could be like academic projects or some other type of project that gets forked. So say for example, one of our projects gets forked, like our cybernetics project, and people were interested in one aspect of that project. They could then rename it and have those materials and recycle those materials and use them in a different way. You end up with these genealogies that are very complex, but they all come from a source project, and they really serve the needs of the time and what people end up doing with them, instead of like trying to distribute a program to millions and millions of people. And it's universally homogeneous, and maybe it works for some people, maybe it doesn't. It's a very, very different mindset from the set of software we're used to, or some of the projects that we're used to, especially in academia. And then, talking about the social capital of working open, and that being open means you can do a lot of different things, not just software. And I pulled that up, a number of examples on that. So that's lecture 1, and then lecture 2 just kind of dives into some of these things a little bit more deeply, going into the working open regime and the things that need to happen. So if you're interested in this working open concept, there's this design phase, a build phase, and an empower phase, and that allows you to work open. So presented a lot of things under that. So there are a lot of there are a lot of examples of that here, the kinds of tools you need. Then I talked about working collaboratively, some of the things that we need to keep in mind when doing this kind of work, how internet technologies have enabled this, and then some examples of distributed research groups. So I give a shout out to us and some of the things that we do, our group meeting here. And here's some examples of our group meeting, people from around the world. So people are joining in from everywhere, even if they're traveling or if they live there. So there's just a lot of diversity in terms of geography and time zones and portability. And so I actually mentioned Jesse's Twirlybird method. And this is an opportunity, Jesse, for you to you could take the ball here and go sideways and say, I'm going to do a lecture on the Twirlybird method and some of the note taking, because I think that's very useful, kind of highlighting some of these different ways of doing this, organizing information, and integrating all these tools into one pipeline or workflow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, I mentioned the Active Inference Institute as well and some of the work they're doing. And then some of what these organizations have in common. And some of the intersection of some of these, how do you create a project that is, where you have to accomplish different things over like a finite time period? And how do you recruit people to do that? And basically you're recruiting people from a pool of contributors. You're recruiting people into the pool, or you're finding the right expertise, and you're scheduling them at different points in time. So if you have a project where you have to do different types of things, you can schedule it, seasonally, and bring them in when they're available, and then you get your project done. So this is very different way of thinking about a lot of this. And I wanted to, there's going to be in coming weeks, there are going to be other topics. This is just kind of an intro to working open. So there's going to be deep dives into different things later on in the semester. Okay, so we have, okay. So there are a couple things I wanted to highlight to people that have come out in the last, some of these are in the Slack, but they've come out in their interesting readings, so I wanted to go over them. The first is this illustrated Stable Diffusion article by Jay Alamar, and he's I guess a good source for visualizing machine learning and different concepts in them. So this is the Stable Diffusion platform. As we know, this is the text to image platform where we can generate different images from a prompt. So it gets trained on a bunch of images, then you prompt it with text, and then that text prompt turns it into an image. So I've played around with it a little bit. I've not been wildly successful at getting really cool images, but I guess the prompts don't have to be that complex. So it's like Paradise Cosmic Beach will generate something like this, a very dreamy picture. So it's kind of like GPT in the sense that it's generative, and you use prompts to get like things that are maybe nonsensical, maybe they're really cool looking. When you do it with art, it's more interesting than with text. Sometimes text doesn't make any sense. An image like this, at least it looks like art, right? Like, but it's it works in the same way. So he has this nice resource on the illustrated Stable Diffusion. This kind of goes through how Stable Diffusion works. It's this text to image algorithm, which allows you to generate from a bunch of images, of which there's been some controversy lately. Namely, there's been a lawsuit against the people who are developing Stable Diffusion from artists who feel that they don't want their work, they don't want their work to train an algorithm to generate images that they could otherwise generate, or something like that. That's something it's not. I don't know who's right or wrong in that, but it's something that's going to happen, I think, with these technologies. And it's something that is, because even with the internet, you think about putting things up on the internet, images that come up on the internet, and then using those as a database to train an algorithm. That's something that a lot of images don't have a license, an explicit license. And so there's some confusion as to what people feel like is exploitative or is something that is allowable. So there are going to be a lot of debates about that, I think, in the future, especially with something like this. But this shows you the components of Stable Diffusion. So you have a text prompt, then you have a text understander or an encoder. So it encodes it into something that can assemble images together. Then there's an image generator. So you have this database of images, you have this latent space where there's, the text under the encoder uses it to select things from the latent space. Then the latent space will generate images that match that part of latent space, and then you end up with these images. So they're combinations of images that it's been trained on. It's not like taking images, storing them in the database, and then putting them like combinations of them together. It's more like we can generate this image based on these features of the space, and then you have this thing that maybe is a combination of different things, and they look kind of psychedelic, and a lot of times when you see what they spit out. So that's what it does. And then so we're starting with a high level view, and we'll get into more machine learning details later. We can say this text encoder is a special transformer language model, technically the text encoder of a clip model. So it's actually a language model, or a version of a language model that they're using, a large language model. And then they're using tokens to enable a lot of this transformation. So the image information creator is the secret sauce of Stable Diffusion. It's where a lot of performance gains over previous models is achieved. So this component runs through multiple steps to generate image information here. So it gets really into some of the features here of this black box and kind of breaks it down for you. So there's this image information space, which is the latent space. And this is a UNet, which is the sort of the core of it, and a scheduling algorithm, which is used to search that latent space. And so the word diffusion describes what happens in this component. It is the step-by-step processing of information that leads to a high-quality image being generated. Then there's an image decoder, which is where it paints a picture from the image it got from the information creator. So you have this text encoder from the prompt, the image information creator, which is this UNet and the scheduler, and then the decoder, which decodes things from this latent space and produces this image here. And so then he goes over what diffusion is. Now diffusion is where there's a specific definition of diffusion in machine learning that they've used. The term diffusion actually is used a lot in physics and in computational or in like statistical physics models, where they talk about like, a random process, things get diffused, or there's a transport process where things are diffused. And that's not really what they're talking about here. This is where you have this step-by-step process of adding more relevant information as you go along. So, and this is from the latent space. So this is kind of talking about some of the details of diffusion, and he kind of shows the process visually. So this is I don't know if this video will work. Okay, there we go. So this is where it's kind of like assembling this thing step by step. It's kind of like emerging from noise. So this is something where you're taking a space where there's no structure at all, and you're kind of adding in structure as the algorithm iterates. And this is another example here. So it's searching that space. It's going from randomness to some sort of feature. It's selecting features and putting them together, and then you get your final image. So it's a nice overview of diffusion with respect to what it's doing in this example. It's starting with this static, this sort of normalized noise, this Gaussian noise, and then it's going to this noise predictor, which is in the UNet, which actually will sort it into these images. And so, yeah, he gives a lot of information about this. So, yeah, definitely check that out. I know that Ankit had made a comment in the Slack that it was very interesting. So that's something I think everyone should take a look at if you're interested in this sort of generative model. So there's this other, I think this is coming up. So this is at Columbia University. This is from their Mind, Brain, and Behavior group. This is the Zuckerman Institute. And this is a conference on curiosity, creativity, and complexity. And this is a conference, I think it's being held in person. It's in New York City. And this is a conference catalyzing interdisciplinary discussion across science, artificial intelligence, and economics. So this is something I found out about. It might be interesting if people are local there, but there might also be interesting to see what the outcomes of this are. And it's just interesting to see these little conferences and what they end up featuring and what people talk about in them. I don't know if it'll be available online, but it'll.
Can you put the link in the chat for that?
Yeah.
Columbia.
Yeah.
Is there a submission to that, or is it just like going to it? I couldn't tell.
I'm not sure. Let me take a look. So, programs. Oh, this is for the institute. This is not for the conference. So poster abstract submission. The conference will include poster sessions, abstract submissions for these sessions are not open. The deadline is February 15th. So this is, pretty close in to where we are now, about a month. And then I guess this is the submission portal, which is like a very, very basic thing. It's just an abstract. I don't know exactly what they're looking for, but if you want to know what they're looking for, there's some list of speakers here. So a lot of these people are cognitive scientists, neuroscientists, etc. I don't know what the poster sessions are usually pretty flexible though, with respect to the main speakers. So I mean, this is, this is something that might be interesting to check out. Did you have something else to say about that, Jesse?
I'm curious. We may try to throw together an abstract for it. I mean, there's a lot of time to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe we should look at the submissions and deadlines spreadsheet as well.
Yeah, I don't have that up today, but we can do that. I guess this is what they mentioned in the description. So this conference showcases cutting-edge research on these questions in neuroscience and psychology. So neural mechanisms of cognitive control, exploration, decision-making, information demand, memory, and creativity. So that's from neuroscience and psychology. And then computer science, artificial intelligence of curiosity and intrinsic motivation, and economics, decision-making, and information demand. So it sounds like they're interested in this aspect of like decision-making and like from this sort of multidisciplinary aspect. So, in neuroscience and psychology, we have what the brain is doing, what the mind is doing, computer science, it's simulating that, and then economics, there's additional decision making and information optimization that happens. There in economics theory, there's a lot of that, but they don't really talk too much about the mind or brain. And there's actually a field, neuroeconomics, where people kind of try to resolve that. The reason I bring that up is because I know that Angela has at least been interested in the past in neuroeconomics, and and Danielle as well. I think has been interested in it. So I don't know where that how that would fit into a submission, but and then alongside formal presentations, the conference would encourage ample interactions among faculty, students, and postdocs. So that's where that would be. That would be how that would be situated. Very interdisciplinary. All right. Then finally, there's this other conference. This is in Sussex, in England. University of Sussex. This is Life Perceives, and this is happening. This happened actually yesterday, so this is not something you can go to now, but this is actually something that's on YouTube. So if you go to there's a YouTube channel for Life Perceives, and there's this live stream that was on yesterday. 7 hours of live stream, which means you can sort through the live stream and find what you want. It says I haven't checked it out yet. It's just, you have to find 7 hours of time well, not that much, but you want to reserve a chunk of time to find to kind of digest some of this. A lot of interesting people: Anil Seth, Michael Levin. I don't know many of these other people from Image, but this is basically what it is. And so this is the website. This Life Perceives. This is an idea of like life and cognition. So this is plants, fungi, cells, and animals. So this is where you have perceptions across the spectrum of life. So, we think of perceptual science as being sort of an animal thing, but you can look at cells, you can look at plants, you can look at fungi. So it's definitely this cognition all the way down idea of that we talked about with respect to Michael Levin. the program is, there are a lot of really interesting things here. There's actually a microphotography exhibit actually you can enjoy this virtually through this link. So this is a nice virtual art exhibit, and this shows you some of these photos. So this is like a photo gallery that you can explore virtually. See, you're in a little virtual room here. You can explore these different images. So that's pretty cool. Then the morning session had talks like fingers, thumbs, and wings, what magic effects reveal about perception and embodied knowledge of movement. That sounds really interesting. Liminal limnology, exploring the space between air and water, AI and ethology, art and science. This panel on interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity, postdisciplinarity. So this sounds like stuff that Jesse would love. Active perception and collective cell patterning. It's Katie Bentley. From physics to mind, the journey of cognition seen through the lens of embryonic development. That's Mike Levin. Fungal brains, Andrew Adamatsky. Non-human umwelts, which is this idea of an internal model, internal regulation of states. This is Anil Seth. He's a consciousness researcher. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just looks cool. You said, I kind of missed what you said before you said my name though. So I was looking at actually it's described, but I was just looking at.
Yeah, Amanda says looks very cool. I said this is something Jesse would love. I was looking through these different topics, especially this interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, postdisciplinary panel.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Okay.
I mean, this is stuff like, if you want to look, it streams on YouTube, so you can go check it out. The different, sessions, you can queue it up and look at it. Yeah, I think it'd be great to kind of check out and report back on, at least informally. I think it would be great. But yeah, those are all things that are going on, different things that we had in our, recent events, recent things of interest. Yeah, so it looks very cool. And so yeah, the project management course is ongoing, and I don't know exactly how to integrate it with the virtual crowd here, like what people in the lab want. In the physical instance of this, I'm doing lectures, I'm posting lectures, so I'm kind of going through the syllabus. I'm going through different topics. The students in the physical version are going to have 2 quizzes, which are basically exercises to walk through, and those will be on GitHub. There's a GitHub repository. And then there's going to be they're going to write a 10-page paper on some organization they care about. It's something they could make up, or, I want them to make an organization, basically create one based on what they care about. So, say you cared about, you wanted to have something that was similar to Stable Diffusion. And Stable Diffusion is an open source community. It's an open source platform. It's an open source community. They have a Discord. They have some other resources. And then, I want people to do a paper on how would they build this organization? How would they manage it? Would they build an open source community? Would they build an open source structure? How would they manage interactions between people? Is it, do they want to focus more on having hierarchy in place, or do they want to have this sort of distributed network of collaborators? What do they need to have in place for that? Those sorts of things. And I don't know how useful that would be to the virtual crowd here, but then the 10-page paper would be published on GitHub as a document, as a markdown document. And so, that'll give people experience of working with markdown and formatting, things like that. And then, we can have them, I would have them present a very short presentation on their idea, but then they'd have this stuff archived online. And so I don't know how useful that is to the virtual crowd. I don't know, maybe there's a way that we do this for people interested who want to, go through the lectures and have discussion in the Discord, and then maybe have some sort of thing that comes out of this, like, an improvement project for thinking about these kind of structures. I know that Jesse earlier mentioned that Jenny is interested in sort of different structures for plot twisters. And I think that actually that's an interesting thing to think about. I encourage her to think about the sort of the meta structure of that, because managing your collaborators is always a challenge. Driving projects forward is always a challenge. So it's always, I think for to think about different ways to do that. Think about the best way to do that for your team. It's not always the same recipe. And then, have ways that people can plug in and collaborate. We've used GitHub in the past, but GitHub is very specific to people who do programming. We could, there are different ways we can do this that don't involve GitHub and so forth.
It's a little funny for me because like I'm doing and definitely interested in all of this, and it's sort of I'm not sure what I should do first in the context of talking to plot twisters folks about some things, or just the simplest thing would be for me to I want to participate in the course. I'm not sure the best way to do that. I don't know. Is there like a discussion area? Is that a discussion area just the Discord, or like where?
Yeah, the Discord channel that I showed earlier. So it's the in the Big Unfinished Ideas Discord, and it's that project management channel.
As kind of a side note, like I'm kind of moving. I haven't done it yet, but I think I'm going to move some of my other stuff to Discord more outrightly for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that'll be good. I don't know if like I'm fine with doing the paper also. Is it a semester long course, or how long is it?
Yeah, it lasts till May. So it's like really till the end of April, but I
may be not the most active for the next couple weeks, but I feel like my content's there, and I'm it's like it's what my life is. Sorry.
Right. Yeah.
So it's sort of like yeah. I don't know the final version of my best way of interacting with it, but like I want to do something. I'm up for writing a paper. I don't know if there's anything else I should do or it'll be better than that. But yeah, I'm already kind of a vested stakeholder in this. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think in your case you might actually think about like riffing off of some of the topics, especially when I mention you. If you want to like create like content that's like a side shot from like the twirlybird method, for example, maybe developing that a little bit more. This is the opportunity to do it. You say, well, how does this really? And because like you've done a lot of work on this, and it's like you've thought a lot about it, and you have a lot of institutional knowledge that needs to get out there, and like people could benefit from that.
Yeah, and I don't know what, like, we don't have to talk about this now necessarily, but I would just add, like, I guess to frame it, because my mind is currently in like the website CV format. Like I could see like, oh, as part of this course, I developed this thing, or but like, what would that be? What would it be? Like I put together a paper, a preprint, a blog post. Like what kind of deliverables do you think it would best be for that kind of stuff beyond just the standard 10-page report at the end of the year, whatever? Like what do you see in that area?
Well, I think you could have like a short preprint, something that at least you could put on like assign a DOI. There's a meta science preprint server, meta archive, that might be good for something like that. I've published once or twice on that, and so it's like a meta science topic, which would be like note taking and information management. How do you manage that in one of these groups? And you could like write a short preprint. It would be like when it could be that 10-page structure, and just have like go through it and then put it up on the meta archive, and that would have your DOI, would have your persistent link, and then you could cite it and say this is something that I did that was a lot of knowledge that I created, because I mean I don't know how many people have, I know people work with these tools, but like thinking about it like you have,
Right.
it's a very very different experience, and so that would be, I think, something that would be a good deliverable ultimately.
It feels very adjacent to sort of where I'm at with the Frontier Map project too, which is sort of like it's basically just to distill it and put it into something other people can interface with.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Let's follow up. Let's say more about that, because I think I don't want to be like a radical force in the course,
Yeah.
but
I think this could be like in the discussion aspect of it, like just and you don't have to actually like make a bunch of noise. You can just
yeah,
right.
yeah. So for me as a virtual online student, would my primary way of engaging with other people just be in the Discord and not like there's no other like
Well, it's just not really yet. I mean, I already have this kind of the schedule plotted out, and we have the Discord, which is going to be kind of a separate thing. And there's actually like a Canvas, which is like a university specific thing, but that's not really, that's just for organizing documents and things. So
Yeah.
I think probably just discussion in the Discord.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure like I'm happy to offshoot or talk or impromptu whatever, but I just didn't know if that was like should that happen in Discord or should that happen someplace else.
Yeah, probably Discord. But if there's something you really have that's really interesting, I can bring it into the lecture. It's not a
And the lectures are they a fixed time for you?
Yeah, in the afternoons on Tuesday and Thursday. So it's like in a classroom. But then I release the materials later. So it's like,
Okay.
yeah, but in my case it's not virtually, so there's no there's like an office hours, but that's about
Okay.
it.
If you want me to like virtually telepresence in somewhere and have a discussion about something, I'm very open to doing that.
Okay,
But
yeah, that might work too.
give me some, time and thinking about it, and I'll like if there's like I don't really know what the specific would be for that yet, but I'm open to doing that. But yeah, I am in the Discord, even though I just closed it,
Okay.
and I'm happy to talk there and do. I think it'd be good. I think there's some kind of deliverable that would be good for me to do in that sense. So
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Yes, let me share my screen. It looks like Ankit had to leave, so thank you for attending, Ankit. I wanted to actually go over some papers.
Can I do one thing that's
Yeah.
paper before that? It actually arrived earlier this week, but I haven't looked at it now, and that's probably why I was distracted, because I got this book and it I think I misunderstood. Like it was in so this is a little story time. I got this book and let me be on camera for this. Hopefully, it's a physical book, and I really don't. I try not to buy many physical books anymore in my life because I just have so much stuff. And I can just go on camera here. And like it was one of those things that you kind of see or find on Amazon or a bookstore, and it's like it's like this looks good, and like it's written by like some important, like it's a book that's called Reclaiming Cognition, by Rafael Nunez. And I'm like, all right, yeah. And I'm like, I'm trying to find more about it or read more about it. It was really hard to find anything about it. And I kind of forgot about it. And then I was like, oh, I'll just order it. And it was originally like, $20 or something a long time ago. It was released in 1999. And I look at it today, I'm like, oh, wow, like this is like all the like so many people we talk about. On the back, like the front, I just posted it in the Condition Futures place. You can see more of, but like it has advanced praise from Antonio Damasio, Hubert Dreyfus, Horst Hendricks Johnson, Susan Hurley, George Lakoff, Stephen Rose, Francesco Varela.
Wow.
The contributing folks are Paul Kysick, Andy Clark, Walter Friedman, Ravi Gottman, Brian Goodwin, Valerie Gray Hardcastle, Jana Iverson, Giuseppe Longo, J.S. Nicholas, Rafael Nunez, Eleanor Roche, Hillary Rose, Robert E. Shaw, Maxine Sheets Johnson, Christine A. Scarda, Esther Taryn, Ide Suda, and Titurvi. And it's just like, oh, like there's a lot here. It's a little bit outdated. It has these topics of like embodied, evolving, and ecological minds, which sounds super Fuchsian. Mathematics and neurobiology with Paul Kysick as the first person in there. And there's philosophy of action, intention, and emotion. And someone had like emotion and movement. The last one is emotion and movement, beginning empirical phenomenological analysis of the relationship. So emotion and movement. It sounds like, oh, it's actually. I think I just kind of forgot about the book. Like, oh, like this is legitimately like a reading group book we could look at now with all these different things, and from like Paul Kysick to Andy Clark to Varela.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So that was sort of a whoa. This is like I'm glad I got the book because it was one of those things that you kind of like see in the background, and it's like, oh yeah, this looks cool, but then you can't really find a digital copy of it, or I couldn't, or I forgot about it, and then it shows up, and it's like, oh, it's actually a physical book I want to read, which is really full disclosure, I kind of hate reading. I just don't like the aspect of holding and looking in my eyes. I try to make it like as multi-sensory as possible.
Right.
Jenny's kind of experimenting with Amazon Polly to do like some voice to text stuff, and I've used some other stuff. But I digress. But we have a cool book to look at now.
Yes.
So that'll be fun.
Yes.
Did you say, or did I see the name Sheets Johnstone? You were talking about emotion.
Johnstone.
It was blurry, but I thought I saw that in the table of contents.
It could be. Let me check this. Yes, Maxine Sheets Johnstone is the author for Emotion and Movement.
Cool.
Did we talk about her before? I forget.
She was cited when I read a few things on like dance and phenomenology of and like proprioception and dance. That's just like a really wild list of names. I'd definitely be into reading that.
Yeah, I can maybe just send you the book, or like I think I might have to just like create a digital version of it, because it's like in that period of time at the end of the millennium where it like fits in that crack of like it was a little bit too niche to be really put into PDF mode much yet. Or I mean, maybe it is. I just missed it. But I'll make one. Also, okay. You were saying?
I did not find a PDF in my brief search.
Yeah. I was laughing because one of the titles by Valerie Gray Hardcastle, just above the Maxine Sheets Johnson one, is called "It's Okay to Be Complicated: The Case of Emotion." I was like, that's so relevant. So, yeah. We can have fun exploring that more in Condition Futures land, and again, anyone's welcome to join our wild group of misadventuring researchers. So, yeah. But yes, we can continue with the papers, probably. So,
all right. So there are a number of different papers here. Wanted to go through some things that have been released recently. This one is something called the Neuron Mixer. And this is the Neuron Mixer and its impact on human brain dynamics by Charlotte Luff, Robert Peach, Ed Boyden, and Nir Grossman. This is a paper on bioRxiv. This is the takeaways. Neurons are more complex. 1, and 2, subthreshold activity is doing more than we give them credit. This is Daniel Barabasi, his Twitter feed. He's reviewing a bunch of papers that came out recently. So this is an image from the paper. This is showing some measurements of membrane depolarization and some of the things that are going on with that. So this is the Neuron Mixer paper, as people were referring to it. This is on the bioRxiv. It's recently released, January 5th. The Neuron Mixer and its impact on human brain dynamics. So what is the Neuron Mixer? So this abstract reads, a signal mixer made of a transistor. So this is the image where you saw like the mathematical functions. Facilitates rich computation that has been the building block of modern telecommunications. So this is a tool called the signal mixer. You put in audio inputs and you can mix them together. And this is something that allows you to make different, you can filter out noise, or you can combine different sources into a single output. Here we report that a neuron cell is also a signal mixer. We found through ex vivo and in vivo measurements. Ex vivo are outside, like, not in the body. It's like maybe in cell culture or something. And then in vivo being in the body. The individual neurons mix exogenous, controlled, and endogenous, spontaneous, so controlled and spontaneous, subthreshold membrane potential oscillations. So these are the things that are generating different types of membrane potentials. This is something that you find in the thing that contributes to action potentials. So different ion channels will, there will be an exchange of ions between the outside and inside of the cell. It creates a membrane potential, and then those, there are a number of different types of ion channels that are contributing to this membrane potential, and then this potential oscillates and it ultimately contributes to an action potential, thereby producing new oscillations. So there are these subthreshold membrane potentials, meaning they're subthreshold for an action potential to be generated. But there's a lot of activity going on underneath the surface that we usually measure an action potential and consider that to be sort of the output of the neuron. But that's actually not the case. They're finding a lot of these subthreshold potentials. Furthermore, we demonstrate that the neural mixing dynamic is evident in human brain activity. So this is this neural mixing where you have these subthreshold membrane potentials that are being combined. They're being produced all the time, and they're contributing to this signaling that maybe, I don't know if it contributes to, I guess, human brain activity, isn't associated with our cognitive functions. Neural network oscillations have been observed in nearly every cognitive domain. So this is in the context of a neural network or a neuronal network. These oscillations have been observed in nearly every cognitive domain and species. Signal mixing enables single neurons to actively sculpt their network oscillations and utilize them for computational operations. So this is where we have the signal mixing. We have, like we've talked about, neurons that are like polysensory neurons or multisensory neurons, where they take input in from different sensory domains and they integrate them in different ways, and they give an output that's like an integration of like vision and sound. This is kind of a similar thing, except it's dealing with these oscillations that are controlled at a certain neuron, and they really give a variable output that's due to these oscillations. So this is actually, this paper kind of goes through this mechanism. They use a sound mixer as an analogy here, and they kind of go through the paper. There's a lot of technical detail here, but they kind of talk about some of these membrane potentials in individual neurons, and then they jump to the network level. And this is where it gets to be sort of hypothesizing how what happens in individual neurons jumps out to the networks of neurons, and how that shapes maybe behavior or some sort of neural response. So there are different oscillations in the EEG, for example, where you have these alpha oscillations that can be observed with the naked eye in the EEG signal. And this relates to a cognitive state or a behavioral state. This posterior alpha oscillation has been associated with top-down modulation of our visual attention, thereby shaping our perception and cognition. So these different bands of EEG are actually something you can extract from the EEG signal. So they're not necessarily related to action potentials. They're related to the oscillations that are happening in these networks. And so this is something that they're making this connection between the two things. And so we found a robust mixing of neural network oscillations between sites of the human brain. The spatial topology of the mixing is shown in figure 4b, which, this is one of these papers where they have the figures at the end of the paper, I think. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to it. Okay. So this shows this membrane depolarization happening in different ways due to this mixing going on. They show the membrane potential, how it differs from, having two different inputs coming in. So you have two different inputs, and then it mixes those and it gives an output, and that modulates what's going on in the network. But going down to figure 4, you have this. This is the example from the network in figure 4. So this is the EEG at these different sites. This is the signal, and then these are the products and the roots. So they can actually do a mathematical analysis of this. This is the network, the brain network with the roots. So they're actually using like these oscillations or these EEG components. They can get mathematical products out of them, and they can do this sort of joint higher order interaction analysis, which allows them to build a network and actually look at different mathematical components of that. So then they can use that to look at these different oscillations and how they affect the network. You can see you have this for different parts of the brain, for the temporal network, parietal occipital network, interregional, and frontal. And so these are EEG bands here, and they're different bands that are related in these different regions of the brain. So, they can do these type of network analysis, and they can look at mixing in different ways. So that's the Neuron Mixer paper. I thought that was interesting. There's also this decision transformer paper, which is, this is pretty wild. In the decision transformer paper, they frame reinforcement learning as a sequence modeling problem. So it's like GPT-3, but instead of the next word, is we know from the language models, they predict word by word in a sentence. It predicts what the next highest reward step is. So this is reinforcement learning where you have rewards for different policies, and that builds upon itself to build this sort of adaptive system behavior. So this is kind of like they use the GPT-3 analogy of a language model. It's predicting what the next highest reward step is. So it's like taking the reinforcement learning and using a large language model or a nonlinear programming approach to it. When applied to the shortest path, it seems to supersede DP. So this is like, this whole idea here of what they're doing here in this paper. So this is decision transformer, reinforcement learning via sequence modeling. And so this is actually from Facebook AI Research and Google Brain, so in UC Berkeley. So this is something that is building upon prior work in reinforcement learning and large language models. So we introduce a framework that abstracts reinforcement learning as a sequence modeling problem. This allows us to draw upon the simplicity and scalability of the transformer architecture. And this is, of course, a specific type of architecture in AI. The seed paper for this was "Attention is All You Need." So it's kind of a provocative title, but it really just mentions that you just need this attention transformer to work, and this is what they're using here. So they're drawing upon this technology and associated advances in language modeling, such as GPTX, which is the number, and BERT. So BERT is actually the original transformer model, so it's from this original paper. In particular, we present Decision Transformer, an architecture that casts the problem of RL or reinforcement learning as conditional sequence modeling. Unlike prior approaches to RL that fit value functions or compute policy gradients, Decision Transformer simply outputs the optimal actions by leveraging a causally masked transformer. By conditioning an autoregressive model on the desired reward or return, which is a reward, this is basically finding a reward from, in a sequence of things, past states and actions. Our decision transformer model can generate future actions that achieve the desired return. So it's basically trying to predict the best return that you can from a sequence and using that to, reinforce the next steps of behavior. Despite its simplicity, Decision Transformer matches or exceeds the performance of state-of-the-art model-free offline reinforcement learning baselines using Atari, OpenAI Gym, and key-to-door tasks. So these last three here are all benchmarks that people typically use on reinforcement learning. It's actually able to exceed the performance of those benchmarks. So this is the Decision Transformer architecture. This is where you have t minus 1. This is this linear decoder, so you have the system in a state that is t minus 1 to t, and then this is your R, this is your S, and A, and so these are these tokens that are fed into a GPT architecture. It predicts actions autoregressively using a causal self-attention mask. So this is a causal transformer. This is a linear decoder, and then this is the other component here. This is the inputs here. So you have the state, the action, or you have the return of the, what that state does in the world, or what that behavior does, that action does. You have a state generated in some environment, and then you have the action. So you're able to predict these actions over time, and they're reinforced over time. So, wow, they have an outline for this paper. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but they talk about evaluation on offline RL benchmarks, the preliminaries of this approach, and then the discussion, which kind of goes from page 8 to 11. How does this work? What's the benefit of using longer context length? So they kind of look at it in different sizes. Does it perform what they call long-term credit assignment? Is it accurate in sparse reward settings? So these are all things that you have to consider for this type of model. I kind of wish that Ankit were still here because we could have a little bit of discussion on this, but basically it kind of goes through some of the details of this. I don't want to go too much into it, but I think it's an interesting paper to just kind of look at and see what's going on in that area. So that's those are two new papers that have come out recently. I did want to talk about one other paper here that's kind of related that I found, and this is taking language models and looking at them from a cognitive science perspective. So the title of this paper is, this is another preprint from the archive. This is Dissociating Language and Thought in Large Language Models, a Cognitive Perspective. And so this is a lot of famous names on it: Josh Tenenbaum, Nancy Kenwisher, Anna Ivanova, F. Fedorenko. Some interesting, it's a nice, interesting collaboration. So this is the short abstract is, I'll read from that. Large language models have come closest among all models to date to mastering human language, yet opinions about their capabilities remain split. Here we evaluate LLMs using a distinction between formal competence, or knowledge of linguistic rules and patterns, and functional competence, understanding and using language in the world. So this is knowing the rules versus using the language. And this is an interesting distinction because we know that language models can definitely know the rules, but using the language is maybe a little bit less perfected. And as we saw in the last paper, you can use reinforcement learning to sort of reinforce some of the things that you learn in the language model. So, it isn't just a matter of learning the rules. You actually use the language and you learn like what's beneficial and what the payoff is for it. So, you can combine those kind of methods in that way. We ground this distinction in human neuroscience, showing that these skills recruit different cognitive mechanisms. Although LLMs are close to mastering formal competence, they still fail at functional competence, which often requires drawing on non-linguistic capacities. In short, LLMs are good models of language, but incomplete models of human thought. So this is their point is here. So let's see. Drawing on evidence from cognitive neuroscience, we show that formal competence in humans relies on specialized language processing mechanisms, whereas functional competence recruits multiple extra-linguistic capacities that comprise human thought, such as formal reasoning, world knowledge, situation modeling, and social cognition. And so there are a lot of things that we have to account for in a model of behavior for executing languages. This is much more than just kind of building a predictive model. In line with this distinction, LLMs show impressive, although imperfect, performance on tasks requiring formal linguistic competence, but fail on many tests requiring functional competence. So we argue, based on this evidence, that 1, contemporary large language models should be taken seriously as models of formal linguistic skills. 2, models that master real-life language use would need to incorporate or develop not only a core language module, but also multiple non-language specific cognitive capacities required for modeling thought. So you need not just a language module, but you need a memory module or an emotion module, or maybe other types of attention modules, not just the machine learning version of attention, but something that actually mimics attention, something that maybe mimics visual processing, things like that. Overall, a distinction between formal and functional linguistic competence helps clarify the discourse surrounding LLM's potential and provides a path towards building models that understand and use language in human-like ways. So again, we have the outline for the paper, and they kind of go through these things, the sort of the formal and functional linguistic competence, what large language models can do, and they give a case study. They can learn hierarchical structure and abstractions in language, but then, of course, their limitations are there's an excessive reliance on statistical regularities, on the statistics of language, and not the context necessarily, or some of the ways in which we use language very creatively and link that to things in the world like images and other types of things. So, context is built on, say, linking language to images or making analogies that are not something that is found in the statistics of the language. Also using a large amount of training data, there's this split between people who think that, you can use developmental methods to reduce the amount of training data, and people who think that you just need to use as much training data as possible, and that will just power you through. Now, the developmental side of that argument argues that you don't really need that much training data, but we've not really figured out how development does that. How is it that development allows us to acquire things that we can't get from training data? And so some people have argued for innates, some people have argued some sort of magic, I don't know. But that's a debate. I think it's worth us exploring, because we talk a lot about training data and development and things like that. So, and then, of course, insufficient tests on languages other than English. English is, the thing about large language models is it seems that there's a preponderance of focus on English, when in fact there are a lot of languages in the world. that could be used as templates or could be understood in terms of the learned language model paradigm. And a lot of those languages have not been explored. They're not only different language families that have different rules, but they're also like pidgin languages and other types of languages that are sort of more ad hoc. And it would be interesting to look at those. And so you have this idea of linguistic competence and, some of the reasoning aspects of that, situation modeling, social reasoning, world knowledge, and then building models that talk and think like humans. So these involve different types of objective functions, benchmarks, and this idea of modularity, which is where the way we think is in terms of modules and separating concepts and linking that to language. And then there are other things that we haven't even talked about that play a role in this. So this is all kind of a sort of a cognitive perspective on large language models, and I think it fits in, especially with that second paper, or the contrast with that. So yeah, I just wanted to give a good overview of some of the latest work that's out there. Amanda made a comment here relevant to analog representation and resonance. That was what was that?
That was in response to the Neuron Mixer stuff about how the like sub-threshold activity is relevant.
Oh yeah, it is. It's good. So any other comments? Jesse, do you have any comments?
All that's interesting. My mind is mostly on everything I have to do in the next 10 days.
Yeah.
There's so many things that are rolling around. I guess that's where I'm at.
Okay. Well, anyways, yeah, so that's great. Well, I'll make the papers available on the Slack. And we can talk maybe about it more later, or, well, I don't know what I'll follow up with next week. Maybe I'll follow up on some of this stuff. We don't do that enough. Okay, any other comments before we go?
Just stay tuned in Slack. Also, if you're an intern and you're watching this, please be active in Slack and say things there. I think I forgot to say, these meetings are really informal and people don't have to be on camera here for them. And I think that maybe I should emphasize that more so people feel like it's okay to come to these meetings.
Yeah.
But I think it can be very intimidating if you walk into a 2-hour meeting where and you don't expressly state that. So
right.
But outside of that, a lot's happening. Really excited about New York's Celebration of Computing. That's going to be sort of a nice, fun thing in the spring again. I'm already looking forward to it's going to be. I don't know. In my mind, it's already sort of February's here. It's been midway through that, and basically winter's basically over. in academic time, winter's over, and now it's spring and summer, and just I feel like I've got to now I don't know. I got to make sure the ground is ripe to plant the seeds, because it's the everything's in motion now. It's just this thing all right, there's so much going on this year, and I'm really excited about all of it. I'm kind of, I don't think I've ever really been so robustly, Gary Marcus # robust AI, robustly excited for all the things happening. And it's just, I did mention the course to plot twisters, and we'll see what they say.
Okay.
But that's about it for me, and I'll talk to you all next week.
All right. Talk to you
Take
later.
care.
Take care.